Good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to a discussion around Black Baton Rouge yesterday and today. My name is Raymond Jetson, and I have the distinct pleasure of serving as the Chief Executive Catalyst at Metromorphosis. But more importantly, it is my pleasure to facilitate this conversation between two dear friends and wonderfully gifted people who have uh, lifted up this important information in the document. The authors, Dr. Lori Latrice Martin and Chris Tyson. Uh, Hello, Dr. Martin and Chris, and welcome. And it's a joy to share this time with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Dr. Martin is a professor of African and African American Studies and Sociology at LSU. She is, of course, the author of many academic works and community-based projects. She's also a member of the executive committee for ABIS, a newly formed organization aimed at addressing racial inequities in sports. And Chris Tyson is a long time actor and activist in the Baton Rouge community. Chris is duly positioned as a professor in the LSU School of Law and the chief executive at the Bill Baton Rouge, the community's redevelopment authority. But today they are here with us as the architects, the people who have lifted up a document that is stimulating conversation across this community. Uh, this Black Baton Rouge, yesterday and today, looking back in order to look forward. Um, Dr. Martin, I'd like to begin with you, and then Chris, if you would follow up. In your own words, how would you describe Black Baton Rouge yesterday and today? What is it?
Well, first, I'd like to thank you again for the opportunity to be part of what I think is a very important project, and one that I think that's going to generate a lot of good other projects as a result of it. And I'll just say that when I think about this particular document, I think that it really represents not only the history of Black people in Baton Rouge, but the history of Black people in America. So a lot of the themes that we see in this document, we could also see them in other places. But the other point is that while there are some similarities to the experiences of Black people more broadly, there are also some things that are just really unique to Baton Rouge. And so thinking about, some of the historical events that have taken place, some of the people who have contributed to the quality of life over time in Baton Rouge, to those social justice advocates who are today beyond Baton Rouge, and in some cases in Baton Rouge, still unsung. I think that this document will help to reveal some of what we have been calling in other contexts historically hidden figures. And Baton Rouge has many, and they have Black Baton Rouge has a lot to be proud of it. And so I hope that that's something that people get from this document, because that's how I see it.
Thanks. Chris?
Afternoon, and thanks again for having me, and just hats off to Metromorphosis for taking the leadership position, as you have done in so many other capacities, of curating this information and creating space for us to reflect and gather and celebrate and just really get into the history of who we are, how we came to be, the context that frames all of the things that we wrestle with in this city, the good and the bad, the things that we wish were better, and the things that we know are uniquely our own, and things that we should be proud of and promote to ourselves and to the others, to others. A people's history is such an important component of identity, of community, of pride, of both looking backwards and looking forward. And Baton Rouge is a community with a deep and rich history, but I think, I feel, and I think others share this, that ours is not a history that is as known as it should be, or as widely appreciated as it should be. And so this document and this process, this experience, and everything that you all are doing, Metamorphosis, is so important to really helping us all appreciate where we're from, where we are, and where we're going through Reflective on Black Baton Rouge.
What did you, and I'll keep going with you, Chris, but even as a native of Baton Rouge, as you went about this experience, working in partnership with Dr. Martin in crafting this, what surprised you, or what was an aha moment for you in this process?
I think it's, the aha moments or the surprises are an ongoing set of experiences around digging deeper and kind of peeling back the onion on our city's history, and particularly with regards to the Black community in our city. I think I continue to be surprised at growing up here and having family rooted here over many generations, how much I still don't know, right? There's always something more that I'm learning. And those wrinkles and those layers are important. And I hope that others really get into this and make it their business to tell these stories and make sure that these names and places and chapters and features of our shared history are better known. I'm surprised, or I'm always taken aback at how much there is still yet to learn, and by that I mean how much valuable, remarkable information there is about this place and its people.
Dr. Martin, you've certainly investigated the history of Baton Rouge through a number of different lenses. Of course, you lifted up the work South Baton Rouge and have worked in the South Baton Rouge area with the Bench by the Side of the Road project. You were certainly a colleague of our dear friend Sadie Roberts Joseph and her work with the museum. And so even though you're not a native daughter, you've certainly investigated the history of this community. What stood out for you? What surprised you as you went through this particular iteration of the work?
Yeah, what's surprising to me is that oftentimes when you try to, piece together the history of Black people in different communities, that you oftentimes run into the problem that there isn't a lot of information, that people haven't documented the positive contributions that Black people have made. And so you're like a history detective trying to piece things together. But what I found in working on this project is that there is a lot of information out there about the wonderful things that have happened in the life of Black people in Baton Rouge across the entire city and region. It's just a matter of pulling it all together, as we were able to accomplish with the help of also Moretta McDonald, to make a document that is accessible to the general public, and then to also have guides so that people can share them. And I also think it's wonderful that the local libraries and other groups have recorded oral histories, and those are really important as well, so we can really listen to the challenges that people faced in participating, for example, in the Baton Rouge bus boycott, which you mentioned, and in other issues. So I'm fascinated by the wealth of information there is about the experiences of Black people, whether that's in Eden Park or in Scotlandville or in South Baton Rouge or in Gardere. And yet we just have to pull it together and be willing to share and talk about it. So I'm really excited about this project.
So when we started a few months ago talking about this project and bringing together work from the wonderful work that Dr. Rachel Emanuel and others had done in Scotlandville, the work, Dr. Martin, that you and I shared in South Baton Rouge, Chris, the actually the seminal document for this was something that you worked on almost 5 years ago now for the launch of the Urban Congress on African American Males. If when we sat down and started talking about this document, I would have told you then that on a beautiful Saturday afternoon, we'd be actually discussing it at the library. And that there had been a neighborhood conversation in Scotlandville and South Baton Rouge and in other communities, that the NAACP would have a robust virtual conversation on activism that was rooted in the document, and that there are more than 25 churches in the community that would center their Black History Month observations from this document, and that there are a number of child serving agencies that are engaging young children around this document, and that the East Baton Rouge Parish school systems virtual Black History program for all of its schools would be rooted in this document that you would be assembling. What would you have thought, Chris?
It's to hear you rattle that off. It's incredibly exciting. The work that I've been engaged in since I've been back in full time, capacity now at Build Baton Rouge is really about understanding this community and all of its beauty and all of its just unbridled potential, and finding ways to highlight that and to cultivate that and to grow that, and telling a story about history and the stories we tell about ourselves, the ways in which we look at what is around us and kind of prescribe what the problems are, which then kind of leads us to certain solutions for better or for worse. That historical narrative is important. And our identity as Baton Rougeans, Black, white, whatever, has to be rooted in an understanding of that historical narrative. So as many people as we can reach to say, because I do think that we are a community that doesn't always appreciate our history. And I don't mean that as Black Baton Rouge, I mean that as all of Baton Rouge, right? And so part of increasing civic pride and really helping everyone, appreciate the singular, unique, qualities of our community begins with the historical narrative. So I'm thrilled that as many people as we can reach to engage in this conversation, and hopefully that this work inspires other people to do their research, because there are even more stories to be told.
Yeah. Lori?
I think I would have been cautiously optimistic about the prospect that all of those things could be accomplished with a single document for a number of reasons. One, I think that while we're celebrating Black history in Baton Rouge and Black history nationally, that not everyone is celebrating with us, and some people are resistant to really talking about some of the myths that people have held on to in this city and this country. And so this document, I think, is an important way to kind of change the narrative about Black history in Baton Rouge and about Black history more broadly. And then I will say, as you mentioned, Raymond, that I'm not from this area, but I quickly realized when I moved here the difference between being a graduate from Capitol High versus a graduate from McKinley High School. And I knew that when some people mentioned the university, they were talking about Southern and others were talking about LSU. So to think that all those different entities would come together around this document just makes me, think that clearly, despite the different communities and different organizations and different interest holders, that there is but one Black Baton Rouge.
Thanks. And I do want to remind those who are here with us, thank you so much for being here, to please, if you have questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We will entertain questions at some point. But Lori and Chris, as we reflected on this work, you know, it's entitled, you know, Yesterday, Today. It's a part of what has been branded Black Futures, a Sankofa series. And so it is about making this benevolent use of the past in order to shape the future and to understand the current context. And so I'd like to drill a little more deeply into one aspect of Baton Rouge's history, and to ask you guys to share your thoughts on how it not only is evidenced in our current, but what does it mean for our future? And it is that you guys lift up in the document the long-running desegregation suit in Baton Rouge. And in many ways, the basis of that lawsuit still looks us in the face daily here in Baton Rouge. And so when we think about public education, when we think about education in Baton Rouge, as this document speaks to it and beyond, what's important for us to know, and how should we understand the manifestation of that desegregation suit in our current, and how should it influence us going forward? Lori, your thoughts?
Sure. So I think one thing that the document helps to highlight is that when we look at the racial disparities in education in our region, that it's important that we not just focus on individuals, but we also look at structures and look at public policies and look at the real consequences associated with those and how they have created literally separate systems, one for predominantly Black students in public education and for non-Black students. And so as we go forward, I think it's really important that we keep that in the forefront of our conversations and our policy initiatives. And that's not always comfortable for people to acknowledge that there have been racial disparities and people have been discriminated against on the basis of race, and that may require solutions that are not universal. And there may be a need to target certain populations or certain areas or certain schools in a way that you may not be doing for others. And so we really need to be talking not just about racial equality when it comes to education, but racial equity, given the history and the relationship between race and education in the city.
Chris, your thoughts? Thank you, Lori.
So, you know, I in our work at Build Baton Rouge and community economic development, where you are dealing with racial and spatial inequality, right? What is that about, and why do we see such disparities in our city depending upon where you are, and that you can feel as if you have left the city when you actually haven't, but you see such a disparity in the amount of investment and the level of concern, and frankly, the level of political will that has been distributed among the communities. And so every community, every city has these issues. The development of 20th century America is a story of Jim Crow, white supremacy, racial segregation. Ours is one that has the distinction of being one of the longest running school desegregation lawsuits in the country. In 1957 to 2003, right? Many of the people who may have felt that was a worthy fight to resist school integration are still with us. Still with us. This isn't something far in the past that we can, you know, look at, you know, black and white film reel and reflect on and lament, oh, that's so unfortunate that those people felt that way. No, there are people with us, you know, who played a part in this, and that makes it that much more difficult to confront and to center as we understand all of these other issues right? Why do we feel as if there are two Baton Rouges? Well, we know that in the first few years of school desegregation, I think 6 or 7,000 white students left the public school system, right? What does that mean? We can trace some of the foundings of private schools in this community to the desegregation fight. And again, this is within my lifetime. This is, every Gen Xer in this community, our lives kind of, map this, and in baby boomers as well, seeing that happen. So it's still very much with us. I don't think we're yet at a place where we can talk about it and be honest about it and its implications for everything that we see in this city, how it has, no pun intended, colored everything about our spatial and social dynamics in present day Baton Rouge. So, we live inside of history, right? Yesterday was history. We live inside of it. These things are still unfolding. They're still with us. And I think with regards to school desegregation, there's still a ways to go for us to soberly reflect on the pervasive implications of resisting for 40 something years school integration, and how that has damaged us from an economic development perspective, from a social development perspective, from a spatial development perspective. I wake up every day, and as many people do in this community, to do work to repair that, right? To redirect us. But make no mistake, that is the genesis, right? For many things in this community. Our long-standing, obstinate, foolhardy commitment to resisting the mandate of school integration for as long as we did.
So Chris and Lori, when we think about this document that has certainly garnered an energy, a synergy, and a life that is kind of our best hope for what it would do. When you think about these really, really important issues that are lifted up in the document, the desegregation suit being just one of them, what would be your best hope for how the conversations that have started and the issues that are being lifted up in impacting how this community understands itself and begins to chart a way into the future? What's your best hope for what this information might do?
So I would hope that this information would provide individuals who are committed to making positive changes with a historical context of understanding, as Chris has laid out, all the factors that have contributed to where we find ourselves today. I also hope that the document is going to inspire, as I know Metromorphosis has done with their Urban Leadership Development Institute, more people to engage in the practice of leadership. I think about someone like Johnny Jones, who just got out of law school and was thrown into all lawsuits, not because he had so much experience, but because he was needed, and he took up that charge. And oftentimes we find with these issues related to racial inequities that people are not necessarily signing up for the practice of leadership, but sometimes they're thrust into it. And so I hope that if some of us find ourselves in those positions, that we'll be inspired by people like Johnny Jones to just, take the baton and do our part, even if we're somewhat skeptical about, how much change we can make within our lifetime. I think that we have a responsibility to continue the legacy of people like your uncle, Gus Young, who did so much to bring us to where we are today.
And Chris, thank you, Dr. Martin. Chris, I'm going to ask you to chime in, but I do want to just share a brief anecdote. Dr. Martin mentioned Johnny Jones, and we're just talking about a man who is a part of and embodies such critical action in our community. Just this past week, I was going to a doctor's appointment, and Mr. Jones was in the building, and he was walking with a family member. And I was just looking at the people who were walking by him and going around him and going about their life, having absolutely no clue who he was. And what he'd done for this community, and for me, I guess one of my best hopes for the document is that those folks, like Mr. Jones, on whose shoulders we stand, uh, are in some way recognized more richly in our community. Uh, Chris, your best hope for what this actually does in this community?
That all of us, across all of the various divides and identities and positions, really come into a full appreciation of the national and international implications of this place, this community, and its history. That we live in a place of significance, in a place of incredible possibility, and that we have to have the courage and the honesty to speak truth to the fullness of who we are, our history, no matter how painful, no matter how embarrassing, no matter how regrettable some of it is, that we can sit with that darkness, if you will, but also sit with the beauty, all of the achievement, all of the accomplishments, all of the strivings, the institutional greatness and contributions, and the individual accomplishments, that we can take all of that and use it to author new narratives, to see our community through new eyes. And in doing so, increase the level of civic pride and also deepen the level of civic commitment that we all have to these our community's problems. There is, especially in the work that we do, we are working to transform our city's most disinvested neighborhoods, which too many people feel as if that is some punishment for people who they feel or misperceive, have made some decisions that somehow relegate them to live in a certain place or way or at a level, not realizing that we're all affected. Number one, there's a linked fate between all of us living here. And so we will only be as great as the weakest among us. But that prescription is actually wrong. It is. And that we can chart the political decisions, the policy decisions, the resource maldistributions, the social and cultural attitudes that have divided and diverted and disinvested and brought us to this position today. And when we do that, right, when we really wrestle with that history, then we kind of can appreciate our collective responsibility, and that we aren't just atomized individuals living in wherever we and going about our lives, but that we have this commitment to this place, this community, and this history, and a moral obligation to right the wrongs, to celebrate those who are often relegated to the margins, to lift them up, and to craft new narratives about who we are, where we've been, and where we're going.
Thanks. I want to touch on a couple of points that are that have a particular connection with each one of you. I want to start with you, Dr. Martin, and Chris. This is certainly to you also, but as you will see, it's rooted in some of the work that you've done. Right now in Baton Rouge, North Baton Rouge has become a placeholder for Black Baton Rouge, and that's what in the minds and of so many that it really means, and so. But one of the things that the document lifts up, and Dr. Martin, your book lifts up, is the really important role that South Baton Rouge played in the development of Baton Rouge as a community, and Black Baton Rouge in particular. This past weekend, that was a unbelievably rich conversation at the McKinley Alumni Center as people talked about this history. To what do you attribute this kind of placeholder assignment to North Baton Rouge? And is it an oversight, or how do you understand this? How do you process this? And how should we, in your opinion?
Yeah, that's a great question. I just like to add that I saw some of that conversation about South Baton Rouge, and to Chris's point about increasing civic engagement and civic responsibility. The other thing I like that some of the panelists said there was that they also held people that represented them accountable. And so they made certain demands and made sure that those demands were adhered to. So I think that's an important piece as well as we think about the future of Baton Rouge. But in terms of why I think that people tend to associate North Baton Rouge with Black Baton Rouge, there was a mapping project, and I like to share this from time to time, where someone actually color coded the census tracts for Baton Rouge and for other major cities. And so you could see where there were continuous Black communities and Asian communities, white communities, and Latinx communities. And so if you look at that map for Baton Rouge, almost all the Black people that are listed on the map, and let's say it's blue, there's a sea of blue in North Baton Rouge. And then let's say that green was the color for white people. There's mostly, that can mostly be found south of Florida Boulevard, with a small patch of Black people in Gardere in the portion of South Baton Rouge. And so I think that that's part of it. And then there also, I think, getting back to the issue of school segregation. I mean, I know that Metromorphosis has done a great job trying to make sure that all kids have access to an excellent education, but we know that there are some stark differences in, the quality and resources that are allocated for schools in North Baton Rouge versus South Baton Rouge. And the uneven development that Chris Tyson talked about before is also pretty clear. And so people oftentimes associate that space with Black people. And so I think that's how those ties came to be known. And so you still have folks like those in South Baton Rouge and Gardere fighting for attention and saying that they're happy about the increased attention under the Broome administration to North Baton Rouge, but they don't want to be forgotten in South Baton Rouge and in Gardere either.
Thanks. Chris?
When I moved back in 2006 after high school in 1993 and gone for 13 years and moving back and obviously visiting throughout that period, but reorienting myself to home. What people were saying, I'd be places and then they'd say, "Oh, we're North Baton Rouge." Like, no, we're not. I was like, we're just on Florida. We're in the middle of the city. What are you talking about? And so understanding, as people have written, the racialization of space, how these shorthands develop as ways of shorthands really to kind of tell certain stories and in quick ways, and what that does with, and this happens in many cities and places, but particularly with regards to Black communities, and that's why another reason why this history is so important is that process truncates Blackness, right? It flattens Blackness. And that is dangerous because it's erasing nuance in history and not understanding the processes of how communities come to be. Neighborhoods are not static, right? The neighborhoods are dynamic in every city. Some of that, is regrettable, as we know, with gentrification and displacement. when we built Baton Rouge, endeavored to work on Plank Road, people who didn't have as long an understanding of Baton Rouge's history would say, okay, well, tell us about this deep Black history in Plank Road. And I would say, well, Plank Road, the neighborhoods were developed as the housing for the white working class workers of the Exxon plant. This is a story of white flight, right? This is a story of housing and neighborhoods that are abandoned, that become accessible for Black people seeking to integrate into neighborhoods, and people leave as soon as they arrive, and then resources leave and assets leave, and this whole narrative of the city changes, and all of a sudden, North Baton Rouge is this dark, dangerous place that you aren't supposed to go. That's a process, right? And I'd rather spend time talking about that process and the decisions and the logics and the rhetorics along the way, because that tells us more about who we are than trying to flatten the city into two sides. And so we should know about Eden Park and Easy Town and Zion City and Old South Baton Rouge, and we should know about these different communities, who grew up there, what who came out of there, what are the institutions and all of that. Let's get into that history and let's focus on that. I get that we have shorthands. I hope that we continue to evolve the language that we use to describe who we are and the spatiality of our identity, if you will. But make no mistake, as you said, it's a shorthand that does kind of truncate and flatten Black identity in ways I think that are deeply problematic for an honest confrontation with with what ails our community, and a productive path forward for how to address that.
Thanks, guys. There are two items in the chat that I want to call attention to in slightly different ways, maybe than at least one of them is presented in the chat. But one individual, Pat, has placed in the chat information around a Supreme Court case, Garner v. Louisiana, and it's talking about the sit-ins, of course, which the Crest sit-in is widely recognized and acknowledged. And this writer points out that the Crest sit-in was actually a part of three separate sit-ins by Southern University students, and ask if that information is covered in the document. And to which my short answer, it's no, it's not. And one of the things that we put in the introduction is that this is not the comprehensive history of Black Baton Rouge, but in reality a slice. And so to those like this wonderful participant who puts in the chat, who has this kernel of important information about Black life and Black history in Baton Rouge, what would be your encouragement in terms of what this document might be able to spur in terms of adding a more complete telling of the history of Black Baton Rouge? Dr. Martin?
Yes, one of the things that I really enjoyed as you and I were going across Baton Rouge and sharing the book South Baton Rouge were all the stories from people who participated in the discussions and shared with us events and individuals that we did not include in the book. You mentioned, we were very clear that, this is our effort to try to document some of the history of South Baton Rouge, and that we welcomed, people sharing stories about things that were not included. One of my favorite things was actually where someone talked about knowing someone highlighted in the South Baton Rouge book, and how she used to work at the Lincoln Theater. So those kinds of stories. And then it brings the memories back for those individuals about families who lived on different streets and so forth. And so I think it's just wonderful that we're able to generate conversations about local history and to inspire other people to dig deeper into their own family history, but also to the history of the communities in which they live, and not to keep that to themselves, but especially in this age of social media, we can share it on so many different platforms and in so many different ways. So I hope that people are inspired to do just that.
Yeah, I would agree. I appreciate the attention that the document is generating and the excitement, and inevitably there are many other chapters of this history that are important, are worthy of celebration and recounting, and that could have been included in this that we did not include. This is not exhaustive, and it certainly isn't the final say. If we are successful at anything, we would have started a discussion and sparked interest to add on to this. As you said, Raymond, I drafted a very truncated, a very small document a few years ago that certainly didn't have as much information as this one does. And we put that forth as a discussion starter, as a reference point. And so I do recognize that when we tell a story, as we've done here, we are making choices about what to include and what not to include for a host of reasons, and that someone could, reasonably and understandably infer from that that we are assigning value. And that is the challenging part of doing this kind of work. And I certainly am not a historian by training, but certainly I've yet to read anything that I've written in scholarship, given some time, some distance from it, and go back and say, you know what, I should have put this in as opposed to this or whatever. So I think it's an ongoing process, and I hope that we continue to flesh out this history. Invariably, there are more stories that the three of us just don't even know, right? That are important or valuable and deserve to be told. And so I view this as one link in the chain and one part of a process.
Thanks a lot. I do want to very clearly say this document was not designed to capture every important moment in the history of Black people in Baton Rouge, and we don't receive that responsibility. And so if there are those who feel as though there are really important parts that are missing, my comment to you is it's your turn. It's now up to you to make certain that that important information is heard. This was never intended to be a comprehensive retelling of every important aspect. I do want to, that there was a comment in the chat that spoke to the diversity of the activism that is present around Black Lives Matter. And the question is about how do we make certain that school systems, school level leaders are accurately sharing history in Baton Rouge. The other that I would add to that part of the question is how do you hope that the young activists in our community who are so fervent in their push for change, how do you hope they would interface with the document? And so how should it impact teaching and learning, in your opinion? And how should the young activists in our community engage with this document, in your opinion? Dr. Martin?
Well, I'm glad to see that you have already initiated some partnerships with some of the schools in South Baton Rouge. And so I think that that is a great start. I also say, just speaking from my experience with some of the student athletes at LSU, specifically the newly formed Black Student Athlete Association, they have been really at the forefront of trying to press the university to require all students to learn more about Black history, including including local Black history, and not just for non-Black people, but for themselves. They want to know more about their history and about and want others to also know, the truth about American history. So I think that this document will provide them with the information that they need to further educate themselves and others. And as we were just mentioning, they may be inspired to create and generate their own documents to highlight more about young people and their activism as well. So I could see this document playing an important role for individuals from diverse populations, as well as for young Black people engaged in the present movement.
Chris? Sure.
I would agree. And, in the last many years, there has been an explosion of interest in 20th century urban policy and kind of understanding how the federal government's role in housing finance, housing development, suburbanization, interstate development was all an avowedly, racist project, right? It was excluded Black people as a part of its design. And for those of us who, had studied this and understood this and kind of, can geek out about redlining and blockbusting and all of this stuff. The work of Ta-Nehisi Coates, the work of Richard Rothstein and so many others have made it accessible in a way that I think, intellectuals heretofore haven't, been able to do. And now people are able to kind of see the world around them through different lens and understand. And as I've always said to people, the things that, are most impacting our communities are in the plain light, right? Read the congressional record, read policy, understand this trail of decision making that is clear and right there for you, and you can understand how things got to be the way they are. So I hope that this continues to inform activists, community organizers, and others who, rightfully are kind of speaking, to issues. And I think the more context that we have, then I think the more we can be targeted in the types of solutions and the types of justice that are required and that are really going to have the impact that's desired.
There is another point in the chat. Thank you. And Chris, it actually ties in with something that I was going to lead to you. And the statement in the chat references a PBS documentary, Driving While Black, and it talks about the interstate development and Black community deterioration. Actually, in the document, you guys lift up St. Francis Xavier School being built, but shut down for a few years to make room for the interstate. And you write somewhat extensively in the document about how Baton Rouge was not spared, as were other communities of color, by the intrusion of progress in the interstate. Well, what would you say about that matter to those who are sharing with us today? Chris?
So I could say a lot. It's a topic that I just find utterly fascinating as a policy matter, as a legal matter, as a social matter, and kind of understanding the history of race, and again as a spatial matter, right? It's kind of urban geography matter. The federal government, through Eisenhower, financed the interstate highway system, which is one of the greatest infrastructure achievements in the world. And certainly modern day America, would not be what it is without, our system of commerce, without the interstate highway system. The federal government financed that 90 cents on the dollar, which meant that all local communities and states had to put up with 10 cents of every dollar. and the federal government paid for this. But the decision-making on siting and location was devolved to the local level. And what we know about mid-century urban America is that the commitment to racial segregation was deep and abiding and pervasive across every level of government. The risk of infiltration, as is the term used in the redlining maps and documents, if you go look at that history, and it's all online. The risk of infiltration by undesirable people who by their very presence will lower your property value, right? Will introduce a level of risk into your life, was so deeply ingrained in not only the American psyche, but also public policy, that the idea that you would create ways for white people to leave the city where they're in close spatial proximity to Black communities, to get out to suburban areas where they can control land use, be exclusive about who can move out there, and use all of the devices to limit access, and run those interstates through the least valuable land, which means that it is the land occupied by Black people, right? It's just a function of how we set up the housing market, that Black skin leads to lower property value. All of this is behind interstates, how they move. In some cities, there are, research has shown that traffic problems are because of the design of the interstates, which are because of the machinations of weaving around white neighborhoods and going through Black neighborhoods, not just, as, hey, this is the optimal policy, but because these were communities to be punished. These were communities to be just dismissed in these decisions. And so all types of poor urban planning happened because of that. And that is the legacy of what we see in cities. And you read about Baton Rouge, splicing through Old South Baton Rouge. My grandparents, great-grandparents' grocery store was one of the casualties right there on South 10th Street. Dissecting Valley Park, when the first phase ended at College Drive. The story in the State Times from the 60s about Negro children hopscotching, as we would say, Frogger style, across I-10 to get to school, schools that had been literally dissected by an interstate. That again, it's not accident. There's nothing that we didn't realize. No, this was the plan. This was deliberate. There people sat around and said, this is something we should do, put money behind, and set the course of our urban planning and spatial development of the city in this way. And we're still dealing with those effects today, right? And I am always going to remind people of that, federal, state, and local billion-dollar policy history when people would much rather, frankly, shame people who are in poverty, who struggle with low wages and live in blighted neighborhoods, as if somehow something they did could have caused all of this. It just doesn't, it defies logic. And we should call out that type of, as I've written, lazy thinking when we have the history, right? We have this history that shows us exactly how this happened. Again, read the congressional record, research the local histories of communities and the decisions that were made, and then understand the cumulative, intergenerationally transferred consequences of that. And that's how we get to today. And that's why the interstate history is so vitally important to understanding, not just Baton Rouge, but pretty much urban America everywhere.
Dr. Martin, do you have thoughts to share on that?
I was just going to say that I think it provides a really good example about how we have to, or some of us may need to rethink how we define racism and anti-Black sentiments, and how we even understand what is meant when people say that Black lives matter. I mean, some people see it as a reigniting of a movement after the killing of George Floyd back in May 2020. But as I've had the opportunity to share with a number of people in the last last few months. I see it more as part of a broader ongoing movement and more as a declaration that Black people have been saying for hundreds of years. And so when you have these anti-Black sentiments, then it becomes very easy for people who are in positions of power to make the kind of choices that Chris just talked about, where they can just, without real concern for the lives and the communities and the families and the children, just build a highway in the middle of once thriving communities. And it provides, unfortunately, teachable moments to students at LSU, for example, who may be familiar with the surrounding area, but didn't grow up in Baton Rouge and don't know this history. So when I can say to them, why does a street near McKinley High School just suddenly stop and end at the highway, and that's not by accident. And so we sometimes want to think that these cities are not planned, or they're not built, and that race is not a factor. And I think the interstate highway system is one of the best examples of that we have, about how a lot of the racial disparities that we see are a consequence of anti-Black sentiments and ongoing racial disparities more broadly.
So thank you so much, Dr. Martin and Mr. Tyson. As we approach the hour mark in our conversation, I'd like to just give you an opportunity to share closing thoughts that you might have about this experience for you, what this moment is potentially for this community. Just your closing thoughts. And Chris, I'll start with you.
First of all, again, just hats off to Metromorphosis for leading this and to giving this city a series like this, to hear from so many voices and to reflect on ourselves and understand who we are at a deeper and more meaningful level. This is an onion, and there are so many stories to be told, and we have to keep peeling and keep curating and keep asking questions and being in dialogue and recording history. I think that's so very important. I think this is one piece of an ongoing effort. And but I also think that it's time for a broader swath of our community to really soberly reflect on and confront and wrestle with what I would say are new framings of how we are the way we are, right? And if we can do that, then I think our prescriptions for our path forward will change as well. And the more information that we can provide for people, the more intellectual curiosity we can spark about all the more that is not told or captured or yet known, then I think the better off we can be. We're an incredibly rich community with tremendous importance and relevance to the nation, to the world. So much has been birthed here and happened here, and it's worthy of this attention. We are worthy of this attention, and I think this is a great way to mark Black History Month and to also celebrate our great city. So thanks again for allowing me to be a part.
Thank you. Dr. Martin?
Yes, thank you. I also echo Chris's sentiments and appreciate the opportunity to be part of this project. And I would say that my hope is that this document will be considered a working document. And as Metromorphosis continues to go forward to educate people about the history of Black Baton Rouge, that the organization will, of course, incorporate things that we learn along the way and new developments as they happen. And so I hope that people will take advantage of the opportunity to contribute positively to the work that is ongoing. And I also just want to say that I think it's important to note too, that as excited as we are about sharing this history about Black people in Baton Rouge and beyond, that some people will feel like it's stirring up old wounds, although for us, we don't see them, as Chris mentioned before, as being very old. And so just for people to be prepared that, there may be some people who are disappointed in some of the things that we're challenging them to talk about, but that we shouldn't be deterred by that and be confident in what is presented here and what we will, of course, add to it at some point, and just continue to share this rich history and tradition of Black people in Baton Rouge.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lori Martin, Professor Chris Tyson. My dear friends, both of you, thank you for your contribution to this work. Thank you for sharing in this conversation. Chris, I have to apologize to you because there's a question in the chat about what could be done to expand affordable housing and community development in disinvested neighborhoods. I'm going to ask them to reach out to Bill Baton Rouge and ask you that question there, because that's part of what you wake up every day to do. I want to thank our friends at the library for creating this platform to begin a conversation. And I want to emphasize to begin a conversation, because I don't believe that the importance of Black history in Baton Rouge ends when the calendar turns to March 1st. Likewise, I don't believe that this document is the end of attempting to chronicle the contributions of African-American people in Baton Rouge. And so this is a beginning of a conversation. We encourage you to pick it up and to carry it forward. I'm going to take a moment of personal privilege and just to say to all of us, I'll leave it there. We all have an opportunity to make a difference in Baton Rouge. My hope is that we would all, Black, white, Latinx, others, this is our community, and we've all contributed to making it what it is. And so thank you again, Dr. Martin. Thank you very much, Chris. And thank those of you who have made time to share with us. God bless you and keep you, and good evening.
Thank you.